Today marks 1 week since the tragic events of 15th of March 2019. So as we remember those who were killed and injured, those whose lives were changed forever on that day, I thought I would post a few responses to things that people have been asking me about, either on email, in person, or through media requests. So firstly, what happens if you've been affected by the earthquakes and now this? For many people who've been affected by the earthquakes and have now been involved in this event in some shape or form, they may experience some feelings and thoughts that might be troubling for them. So in the outer layer of people affected, let's say people who struggled through but survived the impacts of the earthquakes and who now find themselves living in a city full of sirens, emergency activity, and to a large extent sadness and worries about what happens next, then this can act as a reminder of those previous times and make us feel as though we are catapulted back into another time. And this is totally understandable, and yes, it's uncomfortable and unpleasant for those going through it. It will most likely pass if people do the things that they've done in the past that have worked for them, or if they reach out to their usual support for help. So social support and social connection really does seem to be the most important thing that gets us through times like this. But don't be afraid to reach out for help if these feelings and thoughts persist. People have been asking me about children perhaps hiding emotions. So after an event like this, children may hide their emotions because they're ashamed of their reactions or because they want to protect their parents who are also visibly upset, or maybe their siblings too. So they may try and take care of their parents, not because they're coping well themselves, but rather because they worry that their parents are having trouble adjusting. So if you feel like you're struggling with your thoughts and feelings as a parent, or you're having trouble finding a solution with helping your child, make sure you seek help for yourself or assistance with your child. The next one is with children acting out. Children may act out what they've seen online or what they may have heard has happened. And this can be expected, it happens, but we need to be careful about how we respond to this. Of course, if this happens in somewhere like school, then it's understandable that teachers will step in because they want to protect others from seeing this or being co-opted into it unwillingly or victimized in this reenactment. But there needs to be a clear signal that it's not acceptable in this space. But it does show a processing needs to take place. And for many children and adults too, it's not necessarily a verbal talking format that's going to do it for them. So they'll need to find other ways of processing what's going on for them, and talking about it might not work for them. And there are approaches that do seem to be helpful, such as careful use of theatre as therapy. So you may want to investigate some of those options. One of the things I wanted to talk about today is why ritual is really important and why we seek solace in each other's company in times like this, as a community, as a nation. So rituals are important in many different ways. So let me talk about at least 3 of them here. So number 1, rituals symbolize cultural identity and values that we share with our families and wider circles. But it's also an important opportunity to learn from each other. We know that one of the best ways to address prejudice and increase understanding is to actually spend more time in company with people who are different from us, to us. So witnessing and participating in each other's rituals are an important opportunity to do that. Doing this doesn't mean that you become consumed or are totally accepted by each other's cultures, but perhaps it is on the pathway to increased understanding and tolerance. Number 2, rituals ensure that people take the time for emotional connection. Now, often we're busy and just fly past each other, but doing something together with a shared meaning actually has the effect of slowing you down and creating the opportunity for us to connect with one another. So shared meals, community meals, are a really good way of doing this. Number 3, rituals help us to process our feelings as we move through life's transitions and to stay connected despite our conflicts. Often when we disagree or there is conflict, or where there is a threat that has the potential to tear communities apart from each other, we can walk away from each other and take refuge and stew in ourselves or people who reinforce our polar position. So it's even more important to remember to turn towards each other. Rituals that bring us together begin a repair process, and having lasting rituals and repeated opportunities to come together mean that we can maintain these connections and have opportunities to iron out our differences and disagreements and maintain closeness, rather than diverging apart into our echo chambers that only reflect our own points of view. What if we feel helpless and feel like we can't do anything to help? It's sad when we watch others grieve, when we share that time together, but we feel powerless to do anything to help. One of the things that potentially traumatic events like this can do is to remove our sense of agency from us, the feeling that we can stand in our power and exert our influence in the world. For those people who have lost family members, this is a very real and it's very terribly present in their lives right now. For those members in the wider community, in our nation, in our country, who perhaps feel like this as well, that's understandable. What it may require is a response for us to look to new places and new avenues where we can exert our influence. From a systems point of view, then it might mean that we start to address some of the root causes that created the conditions that make something like this more likely to take place, or things that potentially increase the risk of harm once it had taken place. So addressing issues such as proliferation and spreading of material likely to cause harm online, or lobbying institutions to address that through tighter regulation or voluntary boycotts. These sorts of things are ways that we can exert influence and increase our sense of agency. Now, at a ground level, we can help in many different ways, but one of the most important is to increase our understanding of what it is to be a New Zealander in walks of life that are not our own. Only by seeing the world through the eyes of others can we then understand the avenues for action that might help us to influence and make us feel like we are closer to each other, that we can use our agency to do things to increase our collective sense of recovery and well-being after this terrible event. I'll leave it there for now. Thanks for watching, and go well today and into the future.